And so I don't want to, oh, there we are, Rachel. Hey, Rachel, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine. Welcome to the webinar one.
Thank you. Well, my name is Rachel Franco, and I live in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I did recently take the VIA Strength survey. So my top strengths were love and kindness. And I feel that after watching Barbara Fredrickson's YouTube on love, I feel I use it a lot in smiling at other people, trying to evoke positive emotion from them as well, because I think it feeds my positive emotion. But love and kindness is definitely a part of my everyday life.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad you joined us.
Thanks.
I'm trying to look for some other hands now.
Yeah,
Mary.
Oh, there we go, Mary. Hey, Mary.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Yep.
I can hear you very well. And by the way, where are you speaking from?
I'm in Windsor, Colorado, which is right outside of Fort Collins, Colorado.
Ooh.
And as far as strengths, you know, I've taken the Strengths Finder test a few times, and strategy is always the number one.
Uh-huh, okay. How do you use that? Do you find you can use that in a lot of situations?
All the time, because I think I'm also a very creative, resourceful person, and I'm constantly in a problem-solving and building something new kind of mode. I use that at work a lot. I use it in my personal life a lot.
Well, I think I need some more strategizing, so I'm glad you've joined us. My brain is kind of half shut down because there's lots of pollen in the air right now. We're at the sort of peak allergy season on the East Coast. Thanks, Mary. Yeah. But hopefully I'll be intelligible today. Do we see any more hands here? I don't know. I'll open up all the...
You want to just unmute everybody?
I'll unmute everybody, exactly.
Welcome to the webinar. You have entered an attendee in listen-only mode.
Uh-oh.
That's not going to work. Hang on. We're getting feedback. Hang on. Okay. Let me ask Bonita. Are you... Bonita, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, your voice is really clear. You must be next door.
I'm in Canada.
Wow.
All right.
That's next door.
So British Columbia, it's just beautiful outside today on a Sunday afternoon.
I'm jealous.
I haven't done my strengths, the questionnaire yet. That's on my list of things to do. So I'm not really knowledgeable about that, but after listening to other people, I'm very good at listening to others and trying to find a solution to a problem. And that's what my family says I do a lot.
That's good.
Within our family. And so anytime they need a problem solved, they come to me and we sit down and discuss our options and hopefully a solution.
That's good. My kids think that they can solve my problems, so it's kind of the other way around. Thanks, Bonita. Let's see, over to Fawn.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Fawn.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, glad to hear from you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be a part of this. I guess just kind of off the cuff, I would consider one of my strengths to be just a non-judgmental type of person. I think that helps me in lots of areas of my life, especially in the work that I do. It allows me to work with a lot of different populations. But yeah, I guess that would be one of them.
Okay, thank you. And
Yes,
we'll be chatting with you later, hopefully.
Okay.
We have a question and answer at the end, and I hope everybody joins in. So next we have who's next? Let me think now.
Jody?
Jody, yeah. Jody, you have a question mark there.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you really well.
I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that my strengths are listening. And then on a more business level, probably process management.
Process
And-
management. I don't even know what that is.
Well, really identifying where there's gaps in the delivery
Okay.
of a service or executing a service and being able to fill that in and implement a process.
Okay, thank you. And where are you speaking from?
Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, Columbus. Okay. I've been to Ohio. I don't think I've been to Columbus. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
And by the way, do you still have a question?
I
'Cause
don't. I was troubleshooting a little bit here,
Okay.
so I'm not even sure I'm answering your question fully, because I
Oh, no,
wasn't sure how
that's
to
fine.
raise my hand so that you could hear me.
You've done a perfect job. Thanks. Okay, and then finally over to, is it Shannon or, can you hear me? Shannon? Maybe she can't hear me. I don't know why. Oh, she's got an exclamation mark. All right, well, maybe we can get back to her. So, all right, maybe we
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you really well. Deb, actually, it's a great time to join in. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Debbie Park. I'm from South Jersey, closer to Delaware than anywhere else. And I'll be talking about strengths in a little bit, but my strengths seem to always have something to do with love of learning and open-mindedness. So I hope I use them at work and in my everyday life.
And Deborah will be one of the presenters today. I'm really grateful that she joined us. She teaches psychology at Rutgers. She has worked in high schools for a long, long time, and she was representative of the American Psychological Association for high schools in the States. I hope I haven't misrepresented you too much.
No, that's good. That's good. 33 years high school teaching, and so far a total of 14 years at Rutgers in the Camden campus.
And you work with standards in teaching for psychology, right? Curriculum standards.
Yes, I was involved in a lot of different projects, mostly related to teaching educational psychology standards for high school teachers, but also undergraduate standards for college teachers, college professors, introductory psychology as well.
I learned something new. Okay, thanks, Deborah. And we'll get back to you very soon when we talk about the 7 habits.
Okay.
And let's introduce Jeremiah, if Jeremiah is still around. Jeremiah, can you hear me? Oh,
hey, Mark,
okay. Maybe
Mark,
he's very
I hear
busy
you.
at the controls.
Yeah,
So.
I hear you. I'm helping someone out
Okay.
right now. Sorry, I'll get back to you soon.
Okay, that's fine.
Go
so
ahead.
I'll introduce Jeremiah's very busy because I think 1 or 2 participants are still struggling with the controls. He's been working hard for the last 20 minutes. So my name is Mark Sutton, as you know. I'm from England. I think I still have a bit of a British accent left. I usually tell people that I'm in the middle of the Atlantic because when I speak with my American friends, I immediately shift to half American, half English. I'm trained in Asian philosophy. I love teaching Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, although my main area is Confucianism. Right now I'm in Long Island in Setauket, which is sort of interesting because this was where the anti-British spy operation began. And actually my father was a spy, so somehow I've got connections there. He spied against the Germans in the Second World War for the British side. So anyway, I'm very happy to. I just love teaching. My strength, a couple of strengths. Actually, Debbie stole some of my strengths from me. One is open-mindedness, and indeed the other is love of learning. But I don't actually trust my own opinions about myself, and I would love to do what one of my students did, which is to give the VIA Strengths questionnaire to 2 of her best friends. And it was really interesting. They thought she had different strengths than she thought she had. So at any rate, I love using those strengths in what I teach. It took me, I think, 50 years to figure out what I love to do, which is to talk about happiness and to listen to other people and learn about new things about how to find happiness. So I'd like to welcome all of you today, and we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the introduction to the course. Let me remind you, if any of you have a question, feel free to type it on the screen. You know, if Deborah and I are too busy to answer, maybe Jeremiah can at least answer your questions about technical issues. And then either we will get, if you have questions about content, feel free to ask them, and even if we can't answer them immediately, we'll get back to you soon. Let me just get the
I just want to know that it's recording.
website screen here. There we go.
Muted.
Okay, so let me just get the our website Academy screen going so that you can all see the course control panel. Here we go. By the way, if you have any trouble logging on, don't worry. Just shoot an email to Allison, or you can talk to Jeremiah later, and he or she will show you how you can use this, log on and navigate around. So I'm not the best person to do this, but I'm going to do my best. You'll see an introduction to the course instructions at the top here. And it mentions that we have a webinar which we're involved in now. Hopefully you'll all read the syllabus very carefully. You know, when at least see on the right-hand side here, there's a whole bunch of menu items. I think the most important items are the items on what we call the correlates, and each one of them represents one of the habits of happy people. And actually, we're going to talk about them in a different order today, in an order that'll be more fun for you guys. But here on the website, the first is relationships. And just to give you a sort of flavor of how the syllabus and the class are organized, you have the readings on the scientific foundations. Then we have readings on the philosophical links. And I'll talk a little bit later about, you know, what the value is in combining psychology with philosophy. Then we have readings and videos. We have a reflection on most of the, or for all the assignments, for all the correlates, we have a reflection. And if you, if you click the reflection, you'll see that I've got to be careful about this because these are discussions from previous webinars. So the most important thing to remember is that you need to, as you know, you'll be asked to respond to 2 people's reflections for each of the assignments. But make sure you're not responding to someone who disappeared a long time ago. All these people you see on the screen are participants from previous webinars and courses. And I wish we could remove them, but we still haven't figured out a way to do that, but that'll be okay. If you look at the dates, you'll see the new dates from the new contributions sort of pouring in. So I think that's the most important thing to remember for today is, you know, after you write your reflection, make sure you comment on 2 reflections of 2 other participants. And here we have the other correlates, and it's basically the same plan for all the other correlates. And finally, I think this is the most exciting thing about the whole webinar, and this about the whole course, and this is what makes it really fulfilling and exciting for me. Each of you being asked to design either a lesson plan if you're a teacher, or make a PowerPoint presentation based on 1 or more of the correlates about how you've benefited from that particular correlate. You can introduce the correlate, you can talk about your own experiences as you practice that correlate. And we look forward to the second webinar on the 25th. And I will be actually seeing my mom in France, but I'm going to try to get online. But if I can't, I'll let you know well in advance. So that's the introduction to the course. Let me go back to the agenda. Here we go. There we go. So, introduction to webinar 1. This is the order that we'll be doing things in. I'll be introducing our organization very briefly. I thought it might be useful to know a little bit about our history and mission. Then I'll talk about 3 pioneers of happiness. Actually 5, 3 from the world of psychology and 2 from the world of philosophy. And then we'll go right on into the core of our curriculum and the core of what we're all about, which are what we call the 7 habits of happy people. Actually, to be honest with you, they could be 8 habits, they could be 6 habits. What we've done, as you probably gathered from looking at our website, is to amalgamate all the most recent scientific studies on well-being, or as many as we could dig up, especially the scientifically more rigorous studies, and arrange them or aggregate them according to different topics so that we can make the science accessible to non-specialists. Because the big challenge is that there are scientists all over the world investigating psychological well-being and happiness, but as you know, many scientists speak this strange language called, I was going to say Scientology, scientese, and it's difficult for many of us to understand that sort of terminology. So we have done our best to translate their discoveries into understandable English for the non-specialist, as well as talking about the practical implications for the pursuit of happiness. And we consider that to be one of our main missions. So anyway, let me introduce our organization. I'll go into slide mode here. Oh, and by the way, as we go through the 7 habits, Debbie will introduce strengths, relationships. I'll talk about caring, wellness, flow, spirituality, and meaning, and Debbie will introduce the last of the 7 habits, positive emotions and mindfulness. In a way, they're actually 2 habits, but they are related. There's a very interesting research going on mindfulness, especially. Okay, so let me go on and talk about our organization. There we go. Oh, wrong slide. Here we are. So, our 2 big goals are to inform and promote. So based on the scientific evidence, we want to show people that they do have a certain amount of control over their own happiness. And we want to do this through gathering the latest scientific information on well-being, and as I mentioned, making it accessible to everybody who has access to the internet. And promotion is another of our missions, which is to make the pursuit of happiness a top priority, not just to encourage people to make it a top priority in their own lives. And it might sound crazy, to say this, but I think many of us just forget that this is really one of the top priorities of life. We get just so busy, and we forget about our own well-being. But we also want to make it a top priority for educational institutions. And certainly we need to teach math and chemistry and biology. But we believe that education has kind of lost its way because, as Socrates and Confucius pointed out, on opposite sides of the world, the core of education should be what Socrates described as self-discovery and what Confucius described as self-cultivation. So those are two of our main goals. Also, we want to empower people to pursue happiness by showing how to link theory and practice. And that's exactly what I hope you'll discover during this course, because we're going to be giving you practical assignments. They're not easy, they're tough. It means that we have to get out of our armchairs and actually do stuff. And I do my best not to be an armchair philosopher, but I'm probably one of the most guilty ones. So our strategy in doing these things is to enhance our multimedia educational platform on the internet, which of course is focused on human happiness, or more technically speaking, psychological well-being, PWB, or some people call it SWB, subjective well-being. So a little bit of background, I'll talk about this later as well, but why is happiness such a big deal? We're in the middle of a depression epidemic, and if you don't believe me, I suggest that you visit the website of the WHO. They will tell you that worldwide 25% of the global population experience depression at some point in their lives, and that depression will be the second major cause of illness, the second sort of major illness in the world by 2020. And of course, we're doing our best to make sure that doesn't happen. But the other reason why this is such an interesting time to talk about happiness, and such an important time, is that beginning with the pioneers that I'm going to mention, Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi, there's been a huge increase in the number of studies on well-being and happiness. It's now acceptable as a mainstream area of research, and so that's another reason why it's so we feel it's so urgent to make this research available to people. Why do we talk about psychology and philosophy of happiness? I won't go into too much detail today, but as I'll discuss a little way down the road, there's a fascinating relationship between psychology and philosophy, especially with regards to happiness. Psychology is more of an objective approach to discovering how we can avoid mental disease, how we can look at mental afflictions, and how we can deal with them, whereas psychology takes a more subjective approach based on life experience, based on the personal insights of some of the greatest minds in the world. And it's amazing, as I hope you'll discover during this webinar, to see how these two worlds are meeting, especially when we talk about well-being. There's a fascinating amount of agreement between the greatest psychological discoveries and the psychological insights of great thinkers like Confucius and Aristotle. So on to the pioneers of happiness. This is how these people, I think, are responsible for the explosion in the number of scientific studies that are available. And I think it's a sort of matter of debate about, who the earliest person is. Maslow is definitely a huge name, and the reason why is because of his hierarchy of needs. We'll be talking more about this in the webinar, and you'll also learn about this on our website. And by the way, let me just remind you, whenever you want to study about these figures in detail, all you need to do is, let me see if I can deal with a link here. Here we go. Visit our website, and there's two main components to our website. There's the history of happiness and the science of happiness. The science of happiness covers the 7 correlates. The history of happiness, due to the contributions of a huge number of volunteers that I am so grateful for. I can't even mention their names because there's too many of them, but they have, I and the rest of them have written about the thinkers in history who contributed most to our understanding of happiness: Buddha, Socrates, Confucius, Aristotle, etc. And for example, if you want to learn more about Abraham Maslow and why we regard him to be a pioneer of well-being, you can visit this article here. And very briefly, if you can see this diagram, he was, I think, one of the greatest psychological geniuses of all time, especially because of his contribution to our understanding of human needs. And he arranged these needs in a sort of hierarchy, in a pyramid here. And the reason why we feel that he contributed so much to our understanding of well-being is that the very top portion of the pyramid is about self-actualization. He was one of the first psychologists to talk about going from neutral to plus. In other words, the first four needs are what we need to go from minus to neutral. In other words, mental dysfunction to a state of neutrality. So, physiological needs, safety needs, love needs, self-esteem needs. But then, as hopefully you can see from my mouse, we're kind of like, at that point, we're in a sort of neutral area. We're not really unhappy, and we haven't found a deep sense of happiness. And he introduced the idea of self-actualization, where we could, fulfill our true potential as humans, which he felt was much bigger than we imagined it was. So that is Maslow. And again, I encourage you guys to take a look at this article. It wasn't written by me. Let me see now. Yeah, here we go. The second figure is Csikszentmihalyi. Again, there's a section on him in the History of Happiness. He's a Hungarian-American who discovered the concept of flow. And not only that, I would say that probably his greatest contribution is using the scientific method in a very rigorous way to learn more about what makes people happy. And he did this even before Marty Seligman introduced the idea of positive psychology. And the way he did this, just to put it very simply, and you'll learn more about this later, is that he basically turned his students into guinea pigs in a very pleasant way. He asked them to keep a journal of what they were doing and how they felt. And he would beat them a few times a day, and ask them to describe in their journals what they were doing and how they felt. And then when he analyzed the data, he discovered that people were most happy when they were involved in something that they were passionate about and that took great concentration and skill. And we're going to talk about this because it's later, because it's one of the 7 correlates. But he's a pioneer, I think, because he really founded the study of happiness, the scientific study of happiness. And then we go on to Martin Seligman, who is a blockbuster author. He actually inspired this website. I discovered, it's a long story, but I actually had to deal with suicidal students. And one of my students found a huge amount of solace and peace in her study of Chinese philosophy, and I was just so amazed. She wrote me a letter about that, and I was so shocked that she would have found peace of mind through studying Chinese philosophy, because I was educated in Oxford, where we were taught to talk about things as in the most abstract mode we could possibly teach it in, and the more you connected real life with what you were teaching, the less it was regarded as true scholarship. So, as you can tell, I have my issues with academia. And Seligman I discovered Seligman's website because in order to, after I experienced and after I heard this about the student's troubles, I was so shocked that I typed the word happiness onto Google, and as soon as I typed the word, this is like 11 years ago, and I discovered the an introduction to the work of Martin Seligman and the whole idea of positive psychology, and I was so excited. And the reason why I was so excited is I found an amazing resonance between what Marty Seligman was saying and what Confucius had been saying. And I actually wrote him an email. I wrote him a long email, and he wrote an email back, and he was very excited too. And he said, "Oh, you know, we need to have an international conference on this. What do you think about the idea of having a conference on the psychology and philosophy of happiness?" And I had no idea who Marty Seligman was at the time, and I wrote back to him saying, "Well, that's really, really interesting, but I'm too busy right now because I'm still trying to publish very hard so that I can get tenure." But he's been very supportive, and he's been a source of inspiration for our website. And actually, his suggestion about a conference on the psychology and philosophy of happiness was a major inspiration behind the topic of our, the theme of our organization and this website. And his major contribution was not only coining the word positive psychology, but introducing the idea that there's sort of three kinds of happiness, and what he called the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. And as we'll discover, and I hope many of you might have already read about this, so I don't want to belabor it, but for him, the pleasant life was when you discovered to live in the moment, and you cultivated positive emotions, and specifically gratitude about the past instead of resentment, hope about the future instead of anxiety, and especially appreciation of the present moment. And he called that the pleasant life, when we were able to cultivate our positive emotions in this way. And then the good life, it's not exactly the next stage, but it could represent a deeper form of happiness when we discover what our strengths are and we use them in our lives in a constructive way. And then finally, the meaningful life, where not only do we discover our strengths, but we take things to the next level. And not only do we use those strengths, to benefit our own careers, but we use those strengths to benefit the lives of other people. And those are the sort of three kinds of happiness that he talks about. I think this has radical implications for education myself as an educator, and I only wish that every educator in the world would learn more about these concepts. So those are the pioneers of happiness. In the world of psychology, the two great pioneers in the world of philosophy are Zhuangzi, this is really amazing. So you have Zhuangzi and Aristotle. They're both born around 2,300 years ago on other sides of the world. And nearly at the same time, they published they wrote the first essays on human happiness. And it's extraordinary that they did this virtually at the same time, within about 10 or 20 years of each other. Zhuangzi wrote it's pretty well a small volume called Ultimate Happiness or Perfect Happiness, where he talks about happiness as Wu Wei in Chinese, which meant going with the flow. And we'll talk about that a little later. And Aristotle, on the other hand, had a different angle on happiness. He's the great pioneer in the Western world, and he was the first person in history to basically say happiness is one of the ultimate purposes of our lives, and any other goal that we have is actually a goal that is, how do you say that, a goal that precedes the ultimate goal, which is our well-being. So in other words, let's say we think our goal is money, but actually the reason why we want money is so that we can buy a nice car, so that we can be happy, etc. So he felt happiness was the ultimate goal that we're all consciously or unconsciously seeking. And we'll talk more about him too. And then finally, before we go on to the 7 habits, just a quick word about why do we deal with the psychology as well as the philosophy of happiness. You see these 4 Chinese characters in front of you. These 4 Chinese characters were written by the Ming Dynasty scholar Wang Yangming, Zhe Xing He Yi. And the first one means knowledge, the second one means action, the third one means unity. And it's so wonderful how Chinese symbolizes it, that many Chinese characters are sort of little pictures or images that have become shortened over the course of history. So this is a roof, this is the number 1, and this is a mouth. So it's like one mouth under a roof, and it means unite. And this, of course, is the number 1. So it means knowledge and action unite into one. And the whole idea is that, we need to know the theory, but in order to understand the theory, we need to practice it. And in the end, this is sort of like a cycle of understanding and practicing, of theory and practice, and they perfect each other. And they're actually inseparable, because we can't truly know something until we practice it. And he believed that genuine knowledge had an effective component to it. So an empty knowledge, he believed that most of the knowledge we hear about at school is empty knowledge. It doesn't have an effective component. We memorize it, we spew it out when we take exams, and it doesn't mean much to us. Genuine knowledge literally moves us to action. And the reason why we talk about psychology as well as philosophy is that philosophy is sort of the bridge that very often can show us how we can practice the psychology that makes the psychology alive. And they're like yin and yang. The psychology is a science. We discover truth about happiness through objective verification, through empirical evidence that is reliable and persuasive, whereas philosophy is more subjective. How did Confucius, discover these profound insights? It was his life experience. In a way, he was the experiment. He experimented with his own life, rather in the same way that Gandhi did. And that's why Gandhi, as you may know, his biography is called Experiments with Truth. He used his own life as an experiment. And the personal experiences of figures like Gandhi and Confucius we think it can invigorate the teaching of psychology and provide sort of very interesting examples of how they can be implemented. So on we go, and now we're going to talk about the 7 habits. Actually, these are in a different order we're going to be dealing with them in. Let me just take you back to the slideshow here. The top of the slideshow. There we go. Let's go back to the very beginning. You'll see here in our agenda, we're going to talk about strengths, relationships, caring, wellness, flow, spirituality and meaning, positive emotions, and mindfulness. Deborah's going to now introduce the first 2 correlates. I will strengths and relationships. I will introduce caring, wellness, flow, spirituality and meaning, and then Debbie's going to talk about positive emotions and mindfulness. So it's now 2:45 here in New York. I guess it's a lot of different times where you are. I'm just wondering whether, before we begin, any of you have questions. We can briefly stretch and take a breath, I guess. Take a breather, as we say in England. Let me unmute Deborah here. Deborah, can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you really well.
Okay. just before I think we should get started on the 7 habits, but I just wanted to make sure that Norman joined us, and maybe he could introduce himself because he didn't get a chance to.
It's a great idea. I saw his name up. Let's
I can unmute him. Norman? Great. Are you there?
Oh, well. Maybe he could join us at the end. And Shannon, too. I don't think she was able to introduce herself. Let me unmute her.
Hello?
Hi, Shannon. Is that Shannon? Is that how pronounce your name?
Yes,
Okay. That's a big relief. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly, and maybe Norman can if he can hear us?
Yeah, so my name is Shannon, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. And yeah, I'm very excited to learn more about everything related to positive psychology.
Okay, thanks for joining us. We'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
And I don't know if Norman is there, or if he can hear us.
Well, that's all right. We can chat with him later, maybe.
Okay, so I'll give you the screen, shall I?
Yeah, sure. No problem, as long as everybody can hear me.
Okay, let me make you the presenter. Bingo. You should have control of the screen. Yep, there it is.
Okay. Oh, let's see if we can get this going. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm going to hide this thing here so it doesn't close everything off. The one thing
Yep.
Can you see it okay?
Yeah, it looks, we can see it really well.
Okay, one thing I don't like about webinars is that you don't often get to see the people you're talking to, so that's me, just in case you're interested. That's what I look like, and hopefully I will be able to give you a brief but interesting discussion on some of the key correlates that Mark has already introduced. I always like to begin with strengths and virtues. I teach a course at Rutgers on the psychology of happiness and well-being, and after we do the introductory information about what is well-being and subjective well-being and just how do you define happiness, I always like to start off with this particular correlation because I think that it makes sense for us to look at what humanity identifies as really culturally universal values, character strengths and virtues that people have. So that's a really important understanding that I think everyone wants to attain. And I have some essential questions that I ask my students that I think about. How do strengths and virtues contribute to happiness and overall well-being? And what are the best ways to boost your long-term happiness and well-being? And I know that you mentioned, some of you, that certain strengths that you've identified in yourself. And often when you ask somebody what are their strengths, they come up with 1 or 2, and if you ask them what their weaknesses are, they can come up with 20. So I think it's really important to think about our strengths because I feel that they have a really positive effect on our overall life. So at the top here is just a simple definition about psychological strengths being identified as ways of behaving, thinking, and feeling. Sometimes they appear to feel as if they're natural, and it's almost like you don't even have to work hard to use them, which is why often our strengths actually allow for optimal functioning. But sometimes we don't know our strengths, so I think it's really important that we have the opportunity to identify them. Strength interventions are being used a lot now to increase well-being and personal achievement. And the research, some of the research is showing that the best ways to boost your own personal long-term happiness is to use your strengths in new ways and in new situations rather than focusing on your weaknesses. I do believe that we need to be aware of our weaknesses, and I don't think we want to completely ignore them. But I think that a lot of the really good research that has been done, for example, some of these studies that are mentioned on the website, shows that identifying strengths and using strengths will really help us to reach our goals. This study of college students, for example, identified their own personal strengths and allowed them to reach goals that they set for themselves. Also, other studies identified how certain strengths are really linked to life satisfaction, and then they mentioned hope, zest, gratitude, love, and curiosity as some of those strengths. These interventions certainly vary, and as you can see here on the red, that findings have demonstrated that these interventions and just how well I believe the person puts the intervention into effect. So it's really not clear if you can target your own top strengths and if those are the only ones that you should use to try to work on achieving your goals. But we do know that the research studies do show that these character strengths are associated with goal progress. I had to put this picture here in case you hadn't already seen the picture of Dr. Seligman. This is actually Dr. Seligman when I met him in Washington 4 years ago. And we were laughing so hard, I don't even remember what we were laughing at the time, but people were teasing him and saying that, you know, he's not usually this much of a happy person, and he would agree that he's not outwardly happy, but he certainly is responsible for a lot of the great research that we are using today in our study of happiness and well-being. And this just happened to be at Dr. Aaron Beck's 90th birthday party. Dr. Aaron Beck, who is one of the most prominent, well-known psychiatrist in the world, who this August will turn 94 years old. So he has certainly lived a long, happy, successful life. Mark already mentioned a little bit about Seligman's ideas about the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. So I'm not going to go into them in any more great detail, but I will mention that the pleasant life, when we talk about stopping to smell the roses, to savor the things that are happening to us in the present moment, this really is what the pleasant life is all about. It can be physical, but it can also be an intellectual experience. And it helps us to feel good. It provides a really positive emotional effect. So it's a good thing to do this, but just experiencing the moment and having as many pleasures as possible is certainly not the only thing that we want to do, and it's not the best correlate to long-term happiness. Dr. Seligman, talks about the good life and identifying your strengths so that you can employ them in your life. And certainly this can be done in different aspects of our life. So the different avenues of your life that you would want to use your strengths in would be work, play, and love. And so when we look at our signature strengths, and when you do the actual VIA signature strengths survey, if you haven't already done it, you want to think about how your strengths apply to your life in work, play, and love. Because they say that, you know, if you identify your strengths and you use them, especially when you're heavily involved in an activity and experiencing that flow that Mark's going to talk about, that it allows you to recraft your work or recraft your play and maybe make things better than what it might be at the present moment. And of course, the meaningful life is finding a really deep sense of fulfillment. As Mark said, it's sort of like the next level beyond the self. When you really know your highest strengths and you use them for something larger than yourself, your service, your participation in life, it might be to a particular organization or maybe just to the general social institutions of the society like family and government, religion, work, the economy. But going beyond and cultivating yourself also allows you to help improve the society, or as Confucius might say, bringing peace to humanity. I think there's a lot to the meaningful life that allows us to be much more successful as humans and more successful as a group in society. There are a lot of studies listed on the website in reference to the various correlates, and a lot of the studies done by Seligman and Peterson have really found that these strengths are universal throughout the world. The happiest people in the world are those that have discovered their strengths and those that are using them. And when you take this VI Strengths survey, hopefully you will be able to analyze yourself a little bit more and see just how the research might apply to yourself in your job, your relationship, your hobbies even, and those institutions that align with your core signature strengths. Because this is something that I think everybody really would like to do, and sometimes we just have to become aware of how to do it, sit down and take the time to explore it, and then to really, in some cases, even put in writing some of the things that we'd like to accomplish once we identify our strengths or set goals, for example, for ourselves. When we talk about life satisfaction, and positive or subjective well-being, we have to keep in mind how important it is to utilize these strengths and to identify these strengths in ourselves. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything else to this, because you've already mentioned a little bit about the three things, the three types of experiences, but did you want to tell anything about
yeah, I could say a couple of words. I mean, strength is, actually it's a major area in Confucianism, and also with Confucius and with Aristotle. I would say, well, they talk more about virtue, but as you know, there's a sort of close linkage between what's traditionally called virtue and what we refer to as strengths in psychology. I think in particular, let me see if I can. You know what? I can just tell you rather than show the slide, because that's going to be too confusing to switch around. But Confucius, he put a great emphasis on the idea that the ultimate goal of life is to become a junzi, or a sort of a mature person emotionally, not just physically. And the two great virtues in doing this were humanity, which is the idea of putting yourself in another person's shoes, and propriety, which is basically the guidelines, the way you express love. And he felt that these were the two virtues that contributed the most to well-being and what he called social harmony. Aristotle, I think, is really the first person who talked about the link between virtue and happiness, the first person in history. For him, virtue, which is really fulfilling your ultimate function as a person. And we'll talk about what he felt was virtue in a really practical way by talking about friendship in a little while. And then Mencius was another Chinese philosopher who argued that, and he was actually the first, the second Chinese philosopher after the one I described, Zhuangzi, who mentions happiness quite a lot. And he talks about how deep down we have what he called the sprouts of virtue. So in other words, we're not born good, but we do have these sprouts of virtue that we have to nourish, just like a plant. We have to water them and give them fertilizer. We do that through virtuous action. So for him, action was really important, and that led to a deep sense of satisfaction. So unlike Kant, for example, the German philosopher Kant, he felt that we should do the right thing, not because it's our duty, but because we just feel like doing it. So we have to grow to the point where it becomes natural to us. And when we do it, it gives us a deep sense of happiness, which leads us to do it even more. So anyway, there's a big link in the world of philosophy between virtue and happiness.
Okay. I know that some of you have already taken, I'm not really done here, but I just want to show you something. Some of you have already taken the Strengths and Virtues inventory. And of course, on the website, we have a section on Strengths and Virtues, and there's a direct link there to the actual VIA Strengths and Virtues questionnaire that I believe you'll be taking for this course. And even though it doesn't show up there, I do have it. I have it right here. This is the website that you'll be going to. And what's really, they're going to be signing on to this website to take the particular questionnaire, right, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can see, it's really simple to do this. I mean, I use this all the time in my class and actually have my students take a lot of these various questionnaires. But you'll be able to see all the questionnaires there in the middle, and there's the VIA survey of character strengths that you're going to be taking in reference to some of the discussions for this class. So this is actually Seligman's Authentic Happiness website, which has all the newest research in his area of well-being, which is much more, I think, I think it's more important than ever because he's gone from just talking about happiness to overall well-being, which really is a key in understanding life satisfaction. I think happiness is only a small part of that. So that will be something that you'll be looking at later. Okay? All right. So now we're going to go to relationships. Oops, I messed up. Hold on a second. Got to get to the right to the chart here. Okay. All right, so relationships is another very, very important correlate to life satisfaction and happiness. And I really, really like this quote, "Love is natural selection's answer to the banker's paradox. It is the emotion that makes another person irreplaceable to us." Now, we all know that there are different types of love, but we do understand that in all of our relationships, no matter what type of love we might be talking about, it's really important to understand the quality of that relationship and the intimacy of that relationship that contributes to our happiness. So, two essential questions that I like to think about is, how can we identify those relationships? What contributes to the happiness we have in those relationships? And how can we foster happiness in all of our relationships with others? It's almost common sense to say healthy relationships are a vital component of health and well-being, but there's actually a lot of evidence out there in various studies to show that these strong relationships really contribute not only to health and well-being, but to a long, happy, and healthy life. There's a lot of research out there now related to longevity in studies that have been done on centenarians around the world. There's some wonderful studies that are ongoing, the Baltimore longitudinal study, and there's, of course, the Nun study. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but there's many others. And this research really is proving that healthy relationships can help you live longer. There's a wonderful website, the link is here, it's called Dan Buettner's Blue Zones Research, and he actually did research with National Geographic and has, along with psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists, doctors, and many other experts, studied places around the world to try to identify the areas of the world where our longest living individuals are, and how and why these individuals do live so long, and to find the commonalities in their lifestyles. And happiness is one of them, but there's a lot more, of course, to the concept of happiness, and that really clearly has a lot to do in this Blue Zones research with committing yourself to a life with a partner, friendships, and really healthy relationships. There's a lot of research on many different age groups. This, for example, research by Sheldon Cohen on college students and their strong relationships found that these students were healthier and did not catch colds as easily when exposed to a virus. An actual, real scientific experiment that was done in the laboratory, and it's amazing to see just how much our healthier attitudes and happiness related to the relationships that we have affect our physical health. We talk about social networks, groups of friends, people we are friends with in our community as well as at work, and we know that connecting with people is really important. We also find that connecting with healthy people is really important, because if you are with healthy people, then you more likely will have the habits that these individuals have, and you share those habits, and therefore you might share these healthy habits in your own personal life and with your families. So if, for example, you are with individuals that are healthy physically, not obese, then you might tend to practice the same type of activities that they do, whether it's being active, working out, watching what you eat, being careful of the things that you put into your body, etc. We, of course, talk about money sometimes in reference to happiness and well-being, but your group of friends actually has as much effect on you as an increase in income, according to some of the research that's being done today in this area of subjective well-being, and I think that's a really interesting thing to consider. We do also know that there's research out there on low social support. So if you don't have good, healthy relationships, it very much can be correlated to depression. Loneliness is very much related to the pain and fatigue of a lack of social connections, so it's both physical as well as psychological here. Low social support is correlated to decreased immune function, higher blood pressure, and so there are many biological things that can be studied and measured that allow us to actually see the physical negative effect that low social support has on our lives. I think it's really interesting. I love looking at the Blue Zone research. When you identify areas around the world that are considered the Blue Zone areas, and you look at the places around the world where people live the longest, Japan, of course, is one of them. And in Okinawa, there are groups of individuals that truly show us the importance of social connection. If you were, as it says here, lucky enough to live and be born in Okinawa, you were born into a system where you automatically have maybe a half a dozen friends with whom you've traveled through your whole life. And this is actually a real picture of women meeting and discussing and sharing and relating to each other. This is their moai. These women have been together for over 90 years. Every single one of them are over 90 years old. And I would hope that I would be able to have a group like this someday in my life. I don't know, but it's really important that this relationship is with you and you have these connections forever. And I can just imagine how great this makes people feel, the intimacy and the sharing of life history, really leading to positive well-being. By the way, they also have this. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
I know I heard this really funny story about the oldest woman in the world who used to be Japanese. I think she was around 115 years old or something, and they asked her son, what's your mom's secret? And he said, well, I don't know. She sleeps all day. But when she wakes up, she has a glass of sake, and then she laughs her head off, and then she goes back to sleep.
Well, I tell you what, there's some really cool video in reference to the Blue Zones, and the individuals who are living to be 100 years old are doing a lot more than sleeping. I mean, it's amazing. They have video of individuals talking about their lives that are in their 90s. One man is working outside, working on his fence, fixing his fence because he doesn't want to pay somebody else to do it. He's 95 years old. And then he spends 20 hours a week in surgery doing open heart surgery. He's a surgeon, so he's still practicing. And it's just amazing what their positive attitude in health and well-being and how it's affected their life, longevity, and physical health. They also have this concept of ikigai, which is the reason you get up in the morning, which kind of relates to what I just said about the surgeon. If you have a positive feeling about yourself and your friends and the community, and you have a clear sense of responsibility and feeling of being needed, then that is one of the most important things to contribute to positive well-being. So this sense of purpose. I know I've tried to put my sense of purpose into a couple words, and it's really hard to do that, but I think I finally decided that my sense of purpose in life is to learn and then to share what I've learned with others. It's about the easiest way I could say it, since I have been in school since I was 5 years old. And for every year of my life, I've been in school since I was 5 years old. So that's a pretty long time. So I don't know what people might think about their sense of purpose and want to maybe mention something about that towards the end of the seminar when we have questions and discussion. And there's also in the Malays something called Kapong spirit, which is really, if you look down here, it relates back to this term, which I'm really not sure how to pronounce it. Maybe, Mark, you know how to pronounce it better than me. But from the 60s and 70s, when the individuals in these communities in Malaysia really had to get together to try to support and help each other deal with some very difficult times, this man who currently lives there now talks about how this notion is still alive and well. That, you know, even today when people move into a new neighborhood, you really want to greet them, get to know them, share with them and lend them support, because that's the best way to share your spirit with them. And I think that's a really important thing that maybe sometimes we don't do in the United States anymore. I don't live in a development, but I know when I used to, back in the 60s and 70s, we knew everybody, and everybody, you know, was a part of the community. I'm not sure how that is today in the year 2014 as far as people living in developments. Of course, the Gallup Healthways polls that have been done show how important social time is related to day-to-day happiness, and I just thought this was something that might be interesting for everybody to think about. It says if we spend 6 to 7 hours in social time every day, it will maximize our well-being. And some people might be thinking, well, I don't have time to spend 6, 7 hours in social time because I'm working 8, 9, 10, and some people 12 hours a day. But I really think that what is stated here in red is that the secret has to do with maintaining just the right tension between making a living and savoring life. And savoring life might refer better to, you know, the social time that we might be able to share with others. So if you think about these questions in reference to your social life, not to work, it might be something to discuss. Like, how often do you actually get together with your friends as opposed to just working with people, your colleagues on your job? How much time do you actually put into socializing? How many hours do you put in at the office every day compared to your socializing? Do you actually have a closing time, or are you one of those people that are always on the time clock, or always on the web, or always on call? Because, of course, with technology today, that might describe all of us. And are you as productively socially as you are at the office? I think these are really important questions to think about when we're talking about relationships. Mark, would you like to comment a little bit on the philosophical parallels?
Wow, you've got one of my slides. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. Confucius is one of the earliest people to talk about friendship. He didn't talk a lot about friendship, but he does right at the at the first verse of the what's called the Confucian Analects, which is the earliest record of his sayings as recorded by his followers. And it's kind of fascinating that he talks about friendship in the opening passage, because there's one thing about the Chinese classics. Usually the very first passage or the very first chapter always about always sort of encapsulate the main theme or the highlight of the whole work. And so here he says there's two kinds. He talks about two kinds of joy. One is, and this is sort of surprising in a way, to study and then to practice what you study, to put it into practice. So why does that lead to joy? Well, by study, he doesn't mean intellectual study. He's talking about studying the Tao, how to live your life. And he felt that, once you'd learned about it in a book, then putting it into practice led to a sort of deep feeling of satisfaction. But then the interesting thing is that right after that, he talks about one great source of his happiness, which is to meet friends who come from far away. But that is probably not just any old kind of friend. It's a friend who is a fellow seeker of the Tao. And he felt that those are the deepest kinds of friendship, people who not only share your same interests, but also who are friends who are trying to improve themselves. So that's Confucius. And then the other great thinker, and I think the philosopher who talked more about friendship than anyone else is Aristotle, as you're showing here. This slide was put together by a great friend of mine, Lance Hickey, who specialized in philosophy at Columbia, and he contributed an enormous amount to our website. Here's the most interesting thing, and it's actually not on the slide. I discovered this later. Aristotle talks about three kinds of friendship. He talks about the the utility-based friendship is the most basic kind of friendship. The pleasure-based friendship, which is sort of the next stage, and then the virtue-based friendship is the final stage. And what's the difference between those? Well, utility is, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. And he felt that we progress very slowly, if we're lucky, to the next kind of friendship, which is we find pleasure in being with each other. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that kind of friendship. But the third was the kind of friendship where you even forget about your own happiness or your own pleasure, and you're so involved with this friend, you identify so much with this friend that you will basically go out of your way to take care of them to the neglect of your own, of your own affairs. And he sometimes said that took a lifetime, but it was the source of one of the deepest forms of happiness that we know.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we can.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm ready for optimism. You want to go on to yours?
No, you can go on to optimism. That's fine.
Are you no? Well, you said you wanted to do the others in the middle. This is the last one.
Right. Well, I don't mind, but we've got. Let me see now. We've got about half an hour left.
It's 3:16. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can go through this rather quickly if you want me to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right.
Okay. I know we've all heard about optimism. We think about whether or not being optimistic is a much more healthy way to be in life, and it's a really powerful tool. There's always the question of whether we're born optimistic or whether it's something that we can learn. And I've actually been thinking a little bit about this question: can we be too optimistic? Because there's a lot of good studies that have been done recently about curbing our optimism and really looking at it in a much more objective manner. But these are Seligman's words. I thought it was interesting just to hear what he had to say about optimists and pessimists. He certainly has been studying them for a very long time. And he said, we look at pessimists as those who tend to believe bad events will last a long time. Optimists who don't think that way, and they're confronted with maybe the same difficulties that the pessimists are confronted with, but they think about it in a very opposite manner. They consider problems as temporary. They don't look at the causes as overwhelming. Maybe they are specific to the one issue that they're having at the moment. And they perceive sometimes issues as challenges, and they try, and actually helps them to work harder. And that's a quote related to his book, Learned Optimism, How to Change Your Mind and Your Life, that he wrote many years ago. And there's certainly a lot of studies out there to show the benefits of an optimistic outlook. It is linked positively to greater persistence towards goals and coping and adjustment. It definitely has health benefits. There's positive correlations between reduced levels of postpartum depression, recovery from alcoholism, cardiovascular, and other related issues. And it carries social benefits, at least in our society, in Western societies. We tend to think that optimistic people are nicer, and we tend to like them better. That may not really be true as far as the fact that not all optimistic people might be nicer people. But we certainly like the idea that thinking about the future in a positive way is better, because it leads us to feel better about ourselves and also to feel better about the future, which lessens our anxiety. Very related to optimism, and an area that I'm really interested in, is mindfulness. Even though we can look at mindfulness in a lot of different ways, Mark knows this better than me, in fact, about the concept, how it originated in ancient Buddhist, Hindu, and Chinese traditions. In psychology, it's less about spirituality and a lot more about concentration, and not just related to meditation, because you can be very mindful without meditation. And it's a process that needs to be learned. And one of the people that really did the research on this in the very beginning, in the 1970s, which I think sometimes people forget about her, is Ellen Langer. And her research has shown that you can really improve cognitive function and vital functions in individuals by allowing them to be more mindful. And this even in small doses, this idea of mindfulness and being in control and being aware of what's going on around you, affecting how you feel and think, does affect you at a basic neural level. If you're interested in this, it's not one of the books that you'll be reading in this course, but this is her book, Counterclockwise, which explains a lot about the research that she did back in the 70s. And basically, since we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, what she did was she went into a nursing home and made some very minor changes in giving the individuals who were living in that nursing home control over some very simple things, like whether they wanted a plant or maybe control of something they wanted to eat or when they wanted to watch TV, things like that. And she also did some really fascinating research with a group of individuals where she brought them together and changed their thinking about themselves. It was a group of men in their late 50s and 60s in an actual experimental design where she had the individuals really think about living as if they were 20 years younger and talking about things as if it was like the year 1959 or before. And they had to refer to themselves, their families, their careers, their ideas. She even changed the environment to make it appear as if it was back in 1950s. And the results that came out of that experiment were very interesting, very different, very outrageous, and a lot of people were surprised at the results that she got. So if you're interested in that, that is discussed in her book, Counterclockwise. So anyway, mindfulness is a practice. And there are 4 things here that kind of relate to the practice of mindfulness. Paying really close attention, being on focus, on purpose, not being judgmental, being without judgment, and experiencing the present moment. And it is something that you can do in your everyday life. It's something that you can do at work, at home, at play. These are the 4 central components related to body awareness, emotional control, attentional control, and developing new perspectives on the self. But what I find really interesting is that today, because we have the ability to actually measure the changes that take place in our brain using PET scans, MRIs, and other great technology and tools, we can actually see how meditation as well as other mindfulness processes can cause changes to take place in the brain. And we can see these changes that are taking place in the brain that will affect some very important approach-oriented emotional states that we all go through. One really is called self-regulation, which is a very important thing that we all need to have. So with mindfulness training, there's behavioral, there's physical, and there's psychological changes that take place that relate to our neural systems. And also specifically to our attention networks that might allow us to communicate better and to think better and to make better decisions. This is another study that was done at Emory University about meditation practices, and it actually showed some very interesting changes in the brain that relate to the 2 major attention networks that we call the default and the executive networks, which are related again to self-regulation as well as to executive function. And executive function is, all the things that allow us to think and plan and reason and to make good decisions, something that we all need to be able to use in our lives. And of course, at the bottom there's also some research being done in this area on mindfulness and how it might have something to do with various aspects of the brain that allow us to see some of the changes that are taking place in the brain related to Alzheimer's disease. A lot of people are looking at mindfulness and talking about, how it relates to positive thinking. Gratitude is an area that's discussed a lot when we talk about mindfulness, and how pleasures and gratifications in the present allow us to really understand ourselves better and to feel happier about ourselves, related to both hope and optimism as well about the future. And there'll be some activities that you'll be doing in reference to gratitude in the workshop course. And these are just some references to some of the studies that you might be reading about. And I believe you're actually reading one of these books, right, Mark?
Oh, yes.
Okay, in reference to some of the findings that have been found in relationship to relationships and gratitude and happiness and well-being. A very interesting book, I know. Out of all the areas that are studied in positive psychology, gratitude is really one of those that has a lot of research behind it. The positive effect, the greater sense of belonging, the lower levels of depression and stress are related to some of these studies. And it is clearly identified as an important part of the good life. So we believe that it really does demand a lot more research. Mark, do you want to talk at all about the mindfulness and teachings of Buddhism?
Well, yes. Not only Buddhism, but Confucianism and Hinduism as well. And once again, there's an amazing amount of linkage. The whole concept of mindfulness actually, originates from Buddhism. As many of you probably know, one of the famous eightfold paths of Buddhism, including right speech, right intention, right occupation, right knowledge, was right mindfulness. In fact, to be able to, as you know, meditation is the core of Buddhism. Creating the right environment to meditate is, a priority. But those three components, right concentration, right effort, and right mindfulness, those are the three components of a successful meditation. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, actually all the talk about mindfulness now originates from Hinduism and Buddhism, and we've simply sort of latched onto that and strengthened the scientific foundations. But what many people don't realize is that Confucianism also talks about something very parallel, which is called rectification of the mind. The idea that you rectify your emotions by focusing on the present and finding a middle way between emotions that are out of control and not feeling emotion at all. So there's a fascinating linkage there between Buddhism and Confucianism, because most of the time the Confucians will criticize Buddhism, but that's what they have in common with them.
Okay. And I just left this slide up here for you. I didn't know if you want to reference any of these.
Yeah, the Stoics also, in terms of positive thinking, the Stoics, I think, are very big on this, even bigger than the Chinese. Epictetus said, what concerns us is not the way things actually are, but rather the way we think things are. So he's a pioneer in the world of positive thinking. And Zhuangzi sort of implies that when he says, instead of going around pointing fingers at people, why not just laugh? And for him, laughter and humor were a major way that we released our minds from anxiety and obsession about the past and connected with the mysterious Tao, that power in the universe that that leads us to greater well-being. He thought laughter and humor were a very important means of releasing ourselves from our day-to-day problems. And I think I've spoken about the other two. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, and I'm not going to talk anymore about the three topics, but I did want to point out that there are a lot of, like I said, changes taking place in the world today in reference to understanding happiness and well-being. And there are some great websites. I know Ellen Langer actually has research continuing right now, and she's doing research on mindfulness and how it interacts with health, business, and education. So you can go to Ellen Langer's website and see ongoing research taking place right now, if anyone's interested.
Yeah, she's a really big name.
Big time. Yeah. It's very interesting to hear her speak. There's a couple great TED Talks and other conversations online that you can find to hear more about her research. So you want to go ahead and take over the screen?
Yes,
Mark?
if I could, yeah. Let me see now. Can you give me control?
Change presenter?
Or maybe I can give myself control. Let's have a look.
I did it. So I did. There you go.
Oh, you can see my screen now? That's great.
No, not yet.
Can you see it now? I'm going to show you my PowerPoint. There we go. No?
Hold on.
I haven't yet seen the box that gives me permission.
You are on now.
You can see. Can you see my slideshow now?
Nope.
Okay, let me just request keyboard and mouse control. Oh, make presenter. Let me see if I can make myself presenter. Yeah, here we go. I got it. All right, so back to my slide here.
Yep, we're good.
I've got a bunch of little windows open. All right. Caring. that is the, let me see, we've talked about three, the three correlates: strengths, relationships, positive emotions. Caring is huge. A lot of people have said, well, to me that, you know, it's part of human relationships. But I would argue that it's so huge it needs to be on a separate category. If anyone asks me what the key to personal happiness is in one sentence, I love to quote the Dalai Lama. He once said, you know, if you want to be happy, use compassion. If you want others to be happy, use compassion. And he sums it up for me. It's a very simple secret, but maybe something that is much more difficult to practice than talk about. So the scientific research shows us that there's two areas of caring that can impact us. One is sort of more formal caring, and what we call volunteering. But the other is the kind of caring that we can do very simply for the people around us. I mean, the bottom line, because I think of it as a sort of zip through these, is that the other kind of caring, social caring, we can practice on a day-to-day basis. We don't have to travel great distances. It's the people around us that we can do a lot of stuff for. And it's closely related, of course, to the way that people in the blue zones relate to each other, as you were explaining. It's not just socializing. It's being able to put yourself in someone's shoes and thinking about, you know, what makes them feel better, how you can contribute to their happiness. And for some people, that's more natural. For others, you know, we have to sort of continually coax ourselves out of me mode into we mode. And I think many of you may have realized that if you turn me upside down, it turns into a we. Sometimes we have to turn our selfish orientation upside down. And, you know, I do believe that in some cultures, people are sort of trained to think more about the we more easily than the me. So those two kinds of caring seem to have a great impact on our well-being. I would put them sort of really, really high up on the priorities. So, you know, when you go through, if you've experienced depression, probably one of the best things you can do is get out of your chair or turn off the TV and think about, okay, who needs, you know, my assistance? Who can I make happier today? And actually, when you're depressed, of course, it's not easy to make other people happy, you know, if you're thinking negative thoughts. But it is actually easier to do practical things for people without necessarily socializing with them too much. And so there are ways that we can care for people, even if we're sort of troubled by depression. There are ways that we can care for people that can lift ourselves out of depression, or at least build more resilience to depression. And there's a huge amount of scientific research in that area, which I won't go into now. I will tell you that a lot of the research has been done on the elderly, not enough research on young people. But what research on young people does show is that motive is very important, because the funny thing is that the research that is, most of the research done with young people looks at volunteering, not with sort of the personal caring I spoke about. And in many cases, there seem to be no significant data, no significant change in well-being with younger people who volunteered. But the explanation could be fairly simple in that they gave a number of reasons for volunteering. One was that were not related to, you know, really caring for the people they were volunteering for. It was more about, well, how can I polish my CV, you know, by volunteering? How can I find new friends through volunteering, etc.? How can I find a new girlfriend? Because a lot of girls seem to volunteer, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of interesting research going on about intrinsic motives and the impact they have on caring activities. So the trick is, you know, how to motivate yourself to care for others instead of just feeling it's a duty. So that's the bottom line with caring. And as I've mentioned in Buddhism, compassion is a virtue that is closely related to caring, of course. And here's another quote from the Dalai Lama: "The greatest degree of inner tranquility comes from the cultivation of love and compassion. The more we care for the happiness of others, the greater is our own sense of well-being." Very simple, very direct, and the research tends to be heading in that direction. Okay, forget about the number 3. We're talking about physiological factors, wellness here. Wellness is an area that positive psychology did not actually deal with so much. And in fact, in his classic Authentic Happiness, Marty Seligman actually says that physical wellness doesn't have a relationship to happiness, which is actually being disproved by a huge number of studies now. And I've pointed him out. I pointed this out to him. I don't know whether it was me, but he seems to have, you know, in his recent publications, he's changed his approach to this topic. And the most impressive scientific analysis of physical exercise and its relationship to happiness was done by the Cochrane Reviews. They're based in Oxford. They're one of the biggest medical reviews in the world. They actually looked at 125 studies on exercise and depression. They focused on the 25 most scientific studies, and the conclusion of this meta-analysis was that there is a significant impact from exercise, you know, on a sort of inverse relationship to depression. So the more you exercise, the less depressed you are, and it seems to be equally, at least equally as powerful as antidepressants, especially with anxiety and just general depression.
Mark?
Yes.
It's interesting because we use the word exercise, but a lot of the research is showing that it's not so much exercise, going to the gym 5 days a week, working out 30 minutes a day. It's moving the body, which also correlates with a lot of the Blue Zone research. If you're moving and doing things naturally, that is just as effective as formal exercise.
Yes, and actually there's a strong correlation between the amount of time you sit down and your mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So
There's a great video called 23 and a half. If you look it up on the internet, and
okay.
it's all about that. Like what do you need to do only a half an hour a day? It's really the premise behind the video.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's a cool presentation by a doctor. Yeah.
What's it called again?
23 and a half. I'll send it to everybody.
Okay, great. All right. I've just got a hamster here to illustrate the bottom line. Regular exercise, moving around, that's true. I mean, aerobic exercise is the best, but just moving around makes a huge difference. And there's a lot of proof out there that it's associated with improved mental well-being and lower depression.
Just simply walking.
Walking, yep. And actually, you can achieve 3 correlates at the same time if you go gardening. You can, with a friend, go gardening with your friend or a spouse, right? Because then relationships, sunlight and exercise. Sunlight also seems to have an impact on many people. So on to the next one, because we're going to run out of discussion time soon, which is flow. And let me just remind you about the website here. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm just going to guide you guys to the sources of information. Okay, here we go. And again, you know, if you go to the Science of Happiness, the History of Happiness, sorry, and look up Csikszentmihalyi, who's somewhere down here. There we go, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He, as I mentioned earlier on, Csikszentmihalyi, he's not only the one of the founder of the scientific method as applied to well-being, but he discovered this concept. If you want a quote that neatly sums it up, he says, flow is that state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience is so enjoyable that people will continue to do it even at great cost for the sheer sake of doing it. You don't even realize you're happy. You're so involved in the activity. I have skiing here because I just love skiing. it's been too many years since I've been skiing. But that's a really good example of flow activity. But you have to match your skills with the challenge. It can't be, so, you know, if you're a beginning skier, you can't go down the diamond slope. Or if you can, but you're not going to be happy. You're going to be scared out of your wits. And you don't want to be on the beginner slope if you're an expert skier. So you have to match to find flow. I love teaching. That's when I find my flow. And walking along the beach, that's my other flow activity. Although it's kind of borderline flow because I'm wondering, you know, does it really take up so many skills? The philosophy of flow is really evident in the writings of Zhuangzi, the Chinese philosopher I spoke about. There's an extraordinary linkage between what he's saying in his famous book by the same name, Zhuangzi. Wait a minute, let's show this, expand this. The bottom line is that he uses the examples of artisans, and this was very shocking for the Chinese. He used examples of people like butchers, cicada catchers, and swimmers to illustrate people who perfected their skills and found flow, and through flow discovered the Tao. And I think he does this on purpose. He wants to show that unlike the Confucians, what he felt the people who really found happiness were not the people who sat in their armchairs and studied all day, but people who used their hands and had contact with nature and perfected practical skills. So Zhuangzi, you'll be reading a little more about him. Great example of flow in his writings. And I think, is this the final correlate we're talking about?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the final correlate we're going to talk about is spiritual engagement and meaning. And when we first began this website, we didn't even have this correlate. And a psychologist friend of mine said, "What are you doing, Mark?" He said, "You know, there's a huge amount of research on spiritual engagement and happiness." And I said, "Oh, is there really? Where is it?" And he gave me he pointed me to an 800-page book published in Britain. And it's just a massive book. But on top of that book, there are an unexpectedly large number of studies about the linkage between happiness and whether we participate in some sort of spiritual activity. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean religious. A working definition of spiritual would be an activity which sort of links us to the greater, to a greater whole. But very often it's something social. It's not something you normally. In other words, it's more effective if you conduct these spiritual or religious activities within a group. But there is research that shows that groups who do practice some sort of, engage in some sort of spiritual practice, find a deeper sense of happiness, just aside from the social component. So originally there was skepticism from social psychologists that it was the social component that made, you know, spiritual groups happier. But now we found out that even when you take out that element, let's say you compare a group that goes bowling and you compare a group that does some sort of spiritual activity together, there's a definite increase among the group that are involved in meditation or whatever. So what are the reasons? There's a lot of argument about this. I mean, religious people would argue, well, it's God's love, whereas you know, sociologists would argue, more agnostic sociologists would argue, well, no, that's not it. It's the fact that spirituality gives people a structure with which they can find meaning in their lives and purpose. And indeed it is, you know, whether you're religious or not, there is a huge linkage between you know, spiritual engagement and the discovery of greater meaning. And two of the great philosophers who talked about this in the West were Viktor Frankl and William James, and they both have sections on the history section of our website. Viktor Frankl, as many of you probably know, talks about discovering meaning in one of the most meaningless places on earth, or seemingly meaningless places on earth, the middle of a concentration camp in Second World War Germany. And he talks about finding meaning, and it's interesting, there's a lot of unexpected things in this book. It's a masterpiece, and he gives you multiple dimensions on finding meaning in terms of, you know, thinking about his wife and his relationship with his wife. That gave him a sense of meaning. Thinking about getting out of the camp so that he could tell the world about what had been done to his people. That endowed his life with great meaning. And by the way, one of the presenters at a webinar we had, actually I think it was our first webinar. Let me see, we've got educational resources here, teaching resources here. She asked me if she could present a video, and I said, well, video, I'm not sure, you know, because usually when people present, they present their own PowerPoint. They don't present someone else's video. But then she was a Chinese American who works in British Columbia. She said, no, I don't mean any old video. I'm talking about, and she said, let me show you the video, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. And it was a Chinese video. This is it right here. Can you see where it says personal transformation and happiness? And when we saw this video and she translated it into English, we were all in tears. Well, I was in tears. I don't know about the rest of them. But it's about two disabled dancers, Ma Li and Zai Jiawei. And, oh, you've got to see this video. But, you know, they discovered meaning on multiple levels by using their disability to bring happiness to others, and specifically in dance. And he actually uses his stick here, his crutch, in amazing ways. And what happened is this participant, oh gosh, I wish she'd written her name here. I've forgotten her name now. Because I want to give her recognition. Here we go, yeah, Yi Zhang. Well, I asked her, I said, could you sort of publish this for the website? And she did. She put in an enormous amount of effort, but she really is brilliant because she knows Man's Search for Meaning by heart. She's memorized the whole book. She must have read it about 10 times. And she takes quotations from this book that she seamlessly weaves with the story of these two dancers. And I was breathless. When I saw this, I just couldn't describe how I felt. But if you study, look at some of these quotes and then think about these quotes in light of the story of these two dancers, I think you'll have a lot of insight into how to find meaning. And you know, there's a lot of discussion about, well, do we actually search for happiness, or is meaning a sort of side effect of, is happiness a side effect of finding greater meaning? And of course, that's a chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah, I have his book sitting here. It's like dark yellow because it's about 40, 50 years old. It was one of the books I saved that I had to do presentations on in high school and college, and it doesn't even have a cover anymore. It's such a wonderful book. It's my favorite book of all time.
Here's my well, ditto. Here's my favorite quote. Can you see at the bottom? Life can be pulled by goals just as surely as it can be pushed by drives. And what does that mean? The way I see it is that, you know, we're pushed by drives most of the time, right? Biological drives. But when we go to the next level and find goals that pull us by their sheer attractiveness and the sheer delight we get from those goals, our whole life changes. So that's Frankl. And the other thinker I mentioned was William James. That he's one of the earliest psychologists in history, and you can read about him online. But he talks about people who go through suffering and then actually they find a deeper happiness on the other side. I guess I'm one of those people myself, so I can relate to that.
Mark?
Yes.
We have 10 minutes.
Yep. I
I
actually,
just wanted to note that.
I'm actually done.
Oh, okay.
That was the last sentence. So,
That's
that was the last.
awesome.
Your timing is really good.
I was looking at the clock. I was like, oh my God.
Yep. So that's the seventh of the correlates. The philosophical background to the lost correlate we're dealing with, and we're open to questions. So feel free to raise your hand. Or alternatively, yeah, if you raise your hand, you can, or you can alternatively, you can write your questions in the window, and we can read them out. Let's see now if I can.
Can we quickly unmute Norman so he can say hi?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
If he's still there, I think he is.
Norman is there. Let's see if he can hear us.
Because he didn't have it. Norman, are you there?
Maybe he doesn't have a mic.
No,
but that's okay. Anyway, Norman, you're very welcome. I think you've been there through the whole time. You can actually write something in the sort of chat box at the bottom of the control panel if you like. But at any rate, we'll meet you during the 2 weeks of the course. Let's see if there are any other if anyone's raised their hand, we can unmute you and let you speak. Well, there doesn't seem to be any questions. So if there are...
Anita has a question, Mark.
Oh, there we go. Yep. I'm muting her now. Hey, Benita.
Hello. I'm very interested in finding out your sources of the research that you quoted in the various parts of the presentation today. Do you have a list of the sources on the website someplace?
Yes, I'll show you right now. Oh, I love GoToWebinar. Here we go. Let me just go back to the website. And what you want to do is, and we're continually updating the science. So our sources are continually expanding. But just for example, let's say you click on relationships. Can you see that? And then there's a side menu, and you go down to the bottom, and there's an annotated bibliography.
Right.
And then we've picked out the most scientific studies that we've found, and you can get a huge key studies. Just we'll open that page up. And if you click on the little arrow, you'll even see an analysis of each study, an introduction.
Oh, awesome.
And a talk about, and we've got about a few hundred there. So
wow. Okay.
you got a lot of there's as much stuff as you care to read.
Right. And if one is not there that we may have mentioned, just email us and we'll find it for you and send it to you.
Yeah, okay. That's great. Yeah, and if you think of a study that we should include, that would be great too.
Okay.
Okay, great question. And I wonder if there's any other questions here.
I don't see any others.
In the chat box. Oh yeah, we've got, will the slides be available to us after the webinar presentation is over? We don't make the slides available, but we do make the video available, and they'll all be on the video. I think that was the only unanswered question there. So let me just mention that, let me thank Jeremiah and Deborah for joining us. We look forward to seeing you online. Alison Holzer will be managing the forum, and I will be going to France to see my mum, but I will hopefully be able to jump on the forum and join you and comment on some of the conversations.
Unmuted.
We'll be reading and commenting on some of them as well. I love to find out what people have to say about the various topics that are being discussed.
Hey,
okay, great.
Mark? Just
yes.
Jumping in right now. Sharon has a question she posted.
Oh, Sharon. Okay.
Yeah.
Shannon.
Yeah, she wrote, do you have the resources about movement in general versus exercise? I believe that was in regard to moving around a lot versus like 30 minutes every day, or like the Japanese people just moving around in general. And she wanted
yes, I have those resources, definitely. The Blue Zones research.
Yeah, I guess it would be easier just to let Shannon talk to us. So maybe we can just unmute her.
Sure. Okay, let me unmute her. There we go. Hi, Shannon.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any specific, sources that basically speak to what Deborah had said, that just movement in general versus exercising for, 30 minutes at a time.
Yeah, I actually have those resources I use in my class, so I can, how can I get them to you, either via email or
yeah,
email me?
Yeah, what is your email address?
I'll put it right in the chat box.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So that if anybody has any questions or wants any of the resources, just use my name, Deborah Park, at msn.com.
Great. All right.
So I have a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of them on various slides and activity sheets and things that I use with my students.
Oh, Deborah, you sent it in the chat box only to Mark and myself. So try to send it.
Oh, thank you for telling me.
No problem.
Okay, I'll do it again.
That's what I'm here for.
I just realized that. All right, so there's my email if anybody wants it.
Okay, yeah, I would love to see that, because looking here, I don't see much research on, I know there's been a debate about that, does the exercise have to be aerobic, or can it only be sort of motion? And I know there's been a whole series of articles in the New York Times about that.
In one of the classes I teach to nurses at the college, the research that is most prominent is just simply on walking. The results of just simply walking, that research is really evident to positive well-being, and again, natural movement. So I have those resources that I can post.
Okay, but hey, there's a hidden variable that we should look for, and that is contact with nature. And I'm fascinated by this, and it's a very new field, but it's the impact of contact with nature on our well-being. And so what I'd love to see is more studies on whether that is also a component because walking is one of my favorite things to do. That makes me happier than anything else. And I'm wondering whether that's a combination of the exercise we get and also being close to nature, because we've become such urban animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that question, Shannon. That sort of provoked a lot of thinking over here.
Okay.
So unless I see any other hands, maybe I should conclude by saying that we look forward to seeing you online. If you have any problems getting online, shoot an email to Allison. She can troubleshoot with you starting from tomorrow. She's going to send you daily reminders about your assignments, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of your work at the webinar on the 25th, I think it is. And very happy to talk with all of you. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Enjoy Mother's Day for everyone.
Oh, and happy Mother's Day, that's right.
If you're a mother, and if you're not, enjoying anyway.
Okay, bye-bye, Deborah and Jeremiah and the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you.